right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm your host, Christian Sean. We are live from the 704 once again for episode 303 of the 815 Exchange. And ladies and gentlemen, first off, I meant to mention this last week, but episode 301 banged. I don't know what it was. I don't know. Hey, listen, I appreciate it though. The most viewed show we've ever had. Easily, I think it's the first show to clear 1,000 views. So I listen. Appreciate the love. That's all I gotta say. I appreciate the love on 301 because that was crazy. It was crazy to look at. So yeah, appreciate you guys for that. Super cool. All right, super cool. But first off, or I guess second off now, happy Memorial Day. We are recording this on Memorial Day. Happy Monday, May 25th. But ladies and gentlemen, we have things to attend to. We really do have things to attend to. All right, we had a national, or should I say international racing day. All right, usually it's Monaco, but this time we had Montreal. But F1, IndyCar, and NASCAR all having pivotal moments at that one special day of the year on Memorial Weekend. Unfortunately, NASCAR was clouded in a little bit of tragedy, which we will talk to, of course, about Kyle Busch. But overall, a great day for racing. Overall, still a great day for racing. The NBA and NHL, all right, the NHL, which will start us off, by the way, are off and running in the conference finals, and we are already at a pivotal point in all of these series. It is kind of insane, all right? Some of y'all might not last past the day that this episode comes out on. Talking about you, Cleveland. Entertainment, the boys finale, all right, the series finale. Thoughts and, concerns, okay? Thoughts and concerns. Euphoria, penultimate episode of probably that series we have to talk about. BNYX dropped last week, but of course it was Iceman week, so we ain't talk about it. Giveon dropped. It was Iceman week. We ain't talk about it. I haven't gotten around to Luckier V's, but, I do want to give a quick shout out to them here in the outro. And, of course, we got a loaded roundup, all right? We got Women's Lacrosse Championship, all right? We've got the Prim. Did Arsenal bottle it? Spoiler alert, no. Who got relegated in the Prim? And, of course, what should have been a non-factor between Usyk and Rico ends up being yet another example of boxing's corruption, should I say. So, yeah, plenty to talk about today. Shouldn't be too long of an episode, though. Trying to keep it in these 30, 40s, that sweet spot for y'all. But let's get to it, ladies and gentlemen. As always, remember to like, share, and subscribe if you're enjoying the content, or follow, share, favorite the episode if you're watching on Spotify. And everything you're looking for can be found in my description. Timestamps in the description embedded in the video. Also, social media links in the outro, of course, in the description as well. Like I said, NHL, let's get this ship on the road. Starting off with my Carolina Hurricanes over in the Eastern Conference Finals. It was not a great game one. It's what we talked about. It is what we talked about. It was the 2-week, almost a 12-day break in between the Hurricanes sweep and then them playing game one versus the Canadiens. It was a long break, all right? And they came out flat. Montreal came out like a team that, even though they had played much more recently, I felt like they had a lot more momentum. Just off of staying in that groove, and they did. All right, they did. They crushed the Hurricanes in game one. How would the Hurricanes answer in game two? And for some reason, this felt like a game three to me. This felt like a game three, and it felt like Carolina was down 2-0. I don't know if it's because of the history with the Canes and how dreadful they've been in the Eastern Conference Finals lately, or what it was, but it felt like this was as must-win of a game two as there can be. And it looked like Carolina had this thing under control. 5 minutes to go here in the third period. 2-1. Just take it home. Freddie not doing what Freddie does. All right, much better game two than he had in game one. But deflection doesn't corral it. It's a scrum right beside the net. Anderson's able to get it, puts it 5-hole, and that sends us to overtime. However, Nikolai Ehlers has been money in the bank. He was money in the bank in this game. He's been money in the bank in this playoffs. He was big time. All right, he was absolutely paramount for Carolina in this game, especially from an offensive perspective. He gets his second goal of the game here in overtime and wins it and takes, like I said, a pivotal game too. All right, I believe an absolutely pivotal, as pivotal as you can get Game 2 here for Carolina. And they even the series 1-1. All right. Canadians are game. Simply put, the Canadians are game. I think Carolina, of course, with them just kind of storming through the first 2 rounds, we're obviously the favorites. But I think with the Canes' history and that juju here in the Eastern Conference Finals, of just not being able to win a game, and then how game 1 went, I think the Canadians have made a statement. All right, they are a legitimate concern for the Canes. Do not overlook them. This is a much closer series than I think people were kind of expecting. I think that's what it's going to be. So, might need to suit in, sit in, get your snacks, get your drink ready like you do for this show, for this series, because this might be a long one. All right. However, the other series in the Stanley Cup playoffs here is not going to be a long one in the West. It has all fallen apart for the Colorado Avalanche. Now, there were already, chinks in the armor, however you want to describe it. They weren't infallible. I said that last week. All right, Colorado was not this unstoppable machine, and unfortunately, as it does for a lot of great teams, injuries have come for the Colorado Avalanche. And I'm going to be honest, the Vegas Golden Knights are somewhat just outplaying them. I'm going to be honest with you. Listen, I understand McCarr is injured. I understand McKinnon got injured in this game. And that, of course, losing 2 of, let's just say, top 5 players on the planet. Some would say 2 of the top 3 players on the planet, but I won't go that far. But losing the 2 best players on your team, 2 players like Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar, obviously it's going to have a major impact. But I'm sorry, you were up 3-0 after the first period. 3-0. They scored not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5. 5 unanswered goals. Thomas Hertl went out of his body. William Karlsson had a great game. Mitch Marner, 2 assists in this game. He currently might be the Conn Smythe favorite if Vegas closes this out as it's expected for them to close this game out tonight and goes to the finals and they win. Oh boy, Toronto. It's going to get real. Listen, it's been a great couple weeks, been a great month for the city of Toronto, besides the Raptors falling out of the playoffs. But, with Drizzy dropping, boy. All right, if Mitch Marner keeps this up, it is going to be a horrible look on the Maple Leafs. Yet another horrible look on the Maple Leafs, should I say. And I feel like this happened with Kessel. You sent Marner away, said he wasn't a playoff performer, and to be fair, he did underperform. But you had all this pressure on Mitch, and now he's in Vegas, and he's flourishing. He's looking like a superstar. He's looking like a playoff riser at that. So, it's getting real wicked, all right, for the Maple Leafs, but most importantly, for the Avalanche. Down 3-0. I don't think anybody expected this. I certainly didn't. It's crazy. It is crazy. But again, like I've been saying with this Vegas team, a lot of veterans, a lot of guys that have been there, done that. And that experience is so big in the playoffs. Even though, we have an antithesis currently in the NBA with the Spurs who are fresh out doing what they're doing. But on a normal plane, experience is so important in the playoffs, and you're seeing how important he is here with Vegas. Even though Colorado's been here, done that, but just Vegas is just operating at a different level. Listen, we ain't got Torts at the end of the season. Very unconventional to get rid of your head coach that late, but it has changed things. Last week we talked about Carter Hart. This time I'll give some credit to Torts. All right, he's a charismatic, sometimes controversial figure in the hockey world, but he's doing a hell of a job right now with Vegas, and he may just win a Stanley Cup final with the way this is going for VGK as they take this 3-0 lead now going into a sweep scenario against the Colorado Avalanche. And like I said, who would have expected this? Let's go to racing, shall we? Let's go to racing. Let's not go to entertainment yet. All right, let's keep this thing rolling. All right, before we get to Kyle, I'll give Kyle his respect as Rowdy should of getting the tail end of this racing segment. We will go Montreal. All right, we will go chronologically here. All right, we'll start off with F1. It was a very interesting weekend in Montreal with the, rain kind of coming in and coming out, but somehow not affecting the F1. But everybody else got F2, F1 Academy. Everybody else got the rain, but F1 somehow managed to avoid it. But of course, the big story this week was George versus Kimi. Could George, on one of the tracks themed a George Russell track, all right, he is king in Montreal. Won last year. He's done great in qualifying historically in Montreal. He is money in the bank, as they say, in Montreal. However, Kimi Antonelli is not a normal. This is a generational talent. He had a chance to make a statement here in Montreal, as they were suddenly on even footing one again in lesson. All right, it got a little dicey in the sprint race. Got a little dicey. Ends up costing Kimi. He's got to deal with his patience. He's very much so reminiscent of a young Max. Super fast. The only difference is that Kimi's not in a Toro Rosso right now. All right, Kimi is in an even really early Max in the Red Bull. You could even dare say if you want to do a little bit better. But even then, this Mercedes car is much better than that early Red Bull, respectfully. Let's just keep it hot. But Kimi, yet again, another mega talent. And listen, he's straight up is faster than George. He is. He's faster than George. However, the experience, the racecraft, the stuff that comes with, the years of experience that George has on him, that's the advantage, right? That's the advantage in Russell and why people believe that George should be the championship winner this year. However, as we know, it's not really gone like that. But after the sprint race, George kept his composure. Kimi got a little flappable, got a little off kilter, had a little bit of, Dad Toto had to come on the radio and say, stop complaining, bring it back in. We'll talk about it. So George wins the sprint. Lando gets second. Kimi gets third. After fending off Kimi yet again. So here we go into the actual feature race. All right. How would it go down? George is on pole. Incredible qualifying. Barely beats out Kimi. Takes it from him at the last second. How would we go? But first off, before we get to the Mercs, McLaren, who we thought might be a factor here, all weekend they ran basically right behind the Mercedes. They're in a Mercedes power unit. Lando was looking good. Oscar was looking good. There was like a hint of rain chance. And for some reason, McLaren went with intermediates and not soft tires, even though it was told that the rain was gone. Oscar's on the radio during the 2 formation laps because Arvid Lindbald can't get off the thing. So we do 2 formation laps. He's like, yo, just take us in. I'll start from the pits. But at least our race is not completely compromised. All right, we started on the wrong strategy. Let's not do this. They said no, even though there was no rain coming. No rain. I couldn't believe my eyes, honestly. I was like, what is McLaren doing? It felt like they were throwing the race on purpose. It was one of the biggest strategy gaffes I can remember seeing. So anyways, they start the race on wet tires, right? Lando has a great start, takes the lead, but he can't hold it because they got to change tires, which they still kept trying to drive on. And it just went downhill from there. All right, Lando ends up having to retire after multiple car failures. Oscar has a disastrous day. It was just completely botched day from McLaren and a chance where they could have contended with Mercedes perhaps. Even though Mercedes allegedly, is what we've seen, has a stronger car. But McLaren was right there with them and had a chance. But, I don't know what the strategist was thinking. So McLaren bungles it. So eventually, it's just George and Kimi. All right, it is literally just George and Kimi fighting it out, and it was a great fight. All right, it was a great fight. They tried to keep it clean. Kimi got a little upset because George was not giving space. But hey, Toto said it's Max rules. Speaking of Verstappen yet again. All right, he said it's Max rules. Max wouldn't have given it up. Max would have also gone for it. So, hey, just going to have to deal with it. All right, just going to have to deal with it. And it was a great fight. Went back and forth, but Kimi just couldn't get past George, even though he was putting immense amounts of pressure. And they were flying. Okay, they were absolutely flying. To put in perspective of how fast the Mercedes was yesterday, Kimi and George fighting were still able to put a 6-second gap on Max that he just could not cut down. Even with George and Kimi just trading spots, fighting for their lives, they're putting up quality laps. It was ridiculous. And eventually, something had to give. We thought probably that it was going to be a crash, right? Kimi was going to lose his head. He was going to punt, and we were going to have a Barcelona 2016 situation with Nico and Lewis just reloaded for a new generation. Unfortunately, somebody had to blink. And like I said, we thought it would be Kimi. Instead, it was unfortunately yet another string of bad luck for George Russell because it was his car that blinked, all right? He has I think a power unit failure, has to just completely shuts down. All right, I don't know if it was the pressure. I don't know if it overheated from him having to defend and then attack to get the spot back. I don't know what it was. But just a horrible, horrible, horrible thing for the race, but also horrible for George. Power unit failure, he has to DNF, and Kimi just floats from there. All right, just absolutely floats from there, puts it on Max, and wins his 4th straight race, meaning he has over a race lead now on George Russell, the longest in well over 30 years in terms of point gap this early in the season. And yeah, also great battle between Lewis and Max happened behind him. Lewis, classic vintage Lewis. Honestly, a lot of respect from both of them. Listen, we've seen the bad, we've also seen the good. This was the good between Lewis and Max, and they enjoyed it. They both talked about it. It felt like 2 aging champions, even though Max is not that old. Just kind of having fun, having one like last gasp. But yeah, Lewis gets by him, is able to hold him off. It was really fun as an F1 fan to see that. And then we had the all-time podium of Max, Lewis, and Kimi, and they're just so happy because, of course, Kimi, Lewis's, heir appearance. Max is basically taking Kimi under his wing as like his older brother. And of course, they lift him up. It's just this really cool moment, and it could be reminiscent of that classic Senna Prost Schumacher if Kimi becomes who it appears that Kimi is becoming. But yes, huge weekend for Antonelli yet again. Disaster weekend for George Russell, disaster weekend for McLaren, but a great overall race in Montreal. Honestly, very chaotic. Lewis versus Max was fun, and Kimi continues to look like he is not just the next one, but he might just be the now. But it is a long, long season. Do not rule George out yet. All right, don't rule him out yet. Indy 500 was electric, man. Absolutely electric. I'm a come out and say this. IndyCar racing on ovals might be the best racing in terms of entertainment in the world. As just like someone coming as a new, if I was showing anybody that wasn't heavily into racing, like this is what, like I'd show them the Indy 500. And especially a race like this. I think we broke the record for lead changes in the Indy 500 in this race. It was incredible. Back and forth, the starts were, guys trading places. Guys can come from 6th and take the lead and then battle it out. The momentum swings. It was incredible. This is what the pinnacle of racing, which is what the tagline for the event is. This is what it's supposed to look like, and this is what it was. And it came with one of the greatest, if not the greatest finish in Indy 500 history, as Felix Rosenqvist trying to finally get that Indy win. Finally get it. All right. Starts off on the lead on the last lap. We end up getting a caution. Cal hit the barrier. Car was on fire. So we get a 1-lap shootout for the Indy 500, which is epic as is. So Felix starts off on the lead. However, that's been no man's land the entire race. So he gets passed, right? His teammates there with him. But David Malakakis speeds up, takes the lead. He's leading for the majority of the lap, but everybody's coming. You just know he's defending great, but you just know they're coming. And then on that last turn, Felix, with the run of his life, wins this race by 10,000th of a second, the closest finish in Indy 500 history. It was epic. Absolutely cinema. But of course, amidst all of that cinema, right, it's more McLaren woes, all right? Because it couldn't be completely fine for McLaren, even in Indy, right? It just Zach is actually at this race, by the way. So, maybe if Zach was in Montreal, they would have done what they did with the strategy. But anyways, Pato O'Ward, all right, trying to get his Indy 500 win. Always the bridesmaid in this event. He's in second, right? He gets passed, by the way, by Rosenqvist because he was low on gas. Felix had a little bit more juice. And Pato didn't know if he was going to make it, so he had to conserve. So he ends up second off the restart, and then, the crash happens, and it was like, all right, maybe new life, but he just did not have the speed of everybody else, so it's terrible for McLaren. Just absolutely terrible. Pato's so close yet again. Palou gets penalized after the race, failed inspection. But yeah, Malakakis just completely devastated, but hey, still having a great year, second in the standings. Unfortunate to lose in that way, man. To be so close to the ultimate glory in the sport and to lose like that is just so tough. But yeah, congrats to Felix. Hell of a race. almost lost it. That red flag, even though, I won it and it was deserved after the crash, would have been a really cruel way to lose it, because he had it, right? Before that, crash with 5 seconds from Colette, it was Felix's to lose. Pato wasn't going to be able to catch him. Malakakis was too far back to catch him. It was his race to lose, and then to lose the lead immediately off the restart on a one-lap shootout, but then still is able to walk him down, worthy of a champion. IndyCar delivers yet another great Indy 500. What about the Coke 600? All right, the longest race of the year in NASCAR. It is the absolute marathon. However, we didn't finish all the laps because it's been raining here in 704, ladies and gentlemen. I almost went to this race. And I love NASCAR, as we know. I would have not been staying for the entire time. I'm going to just get that off my chest. There's no shot. There's no shot. The race is too long, okay? However, all right, it was, of course, clouded feels like a cruel word to say. Unfortunate circumstance surrounding this event, of course, because of the sudden and tragic death of one of the greatest racers, one of the greatest drivers of all time in Kyle Busch. He died, I believe it was Thursday. We got that. And it was crazy. It was crazy besides like the suddenness. I saw like his name trending faintly in the morning. And I think that's when like the tweet went out about him being admitted to the hospital, and they was like it was a severe illness. But when you see that, you're like, okay, prayers for Kyle. But there's always the assumption of, okay, he's just ill. He's gonna get better. He won't be able to race this weekend, but he'll be fine. And then the whiplash of going on, I think it was IG. And I saw the post that said, it was literally minutes or seconds. I think I got there seconds just by luck of the draw, that he was gone. It was stunning. I think I was in the bathroom. I was just in silence for a couple minutes. Because I couldn't believe, like my brain couldn't fathom that we went from, I just saw that he was ill, he's in the hospital, prayers up. You're just not racing this weekend, to we're never going to see Kyle Busch race again. He's gone. And then, 3 days ago, it was Brexton's birthday. It was last week he won the Truck Series race. It was crazy. It was crazy. It was one of those, it was very similar. I think a lot of people have been pointing to this. It was very similar to what I felt when Kobe died. Even though I didn't have as emotional as a reaction, it was just like, it didn't feel real. It was like, I can't, like this legend of the sport, this person that I grew up watching and helped form my love of, why I'm even sitting here in front of this camera, is gone. It's gone. And it was a very emotional week for the sport, very emotional week at the track, very emotional week for the community here in Charlotte, because of how close NASCAR is and how embedded it is into the city and its kind of surrounding areas, especially where I live. It was rough. It was rough, man. Sorry. Yeah. 234 wins for Kyle in his career, most all time. 102 in O'Reilly, and the 69 in Truck, of course, are records. 63 in Cup, I think, is what, 9th all time. It's a legend of the sport. All right, absolute legend of the sport. Could win in anything, anything you give him the drive, he could win in. Often played the villain. During his prime, he was one of the more villainous characters, but I think something that was necessary for the sport. And you gotta have heroes, you gotta have villains, but still had a very large fan base. Shout out to Rowdy Nation, that loved him, and I think a lot of people began like respecting him. I think there was always respect, but once legends get to a certain age and it kind of like the dominance starts to wane a little bit, they start to get their flowers a lot more. And we were seeing Kyle get kind of his flowers for how great he was a lot more recently, even with him not finding that same level of success at RCR. But it was rough, man. It was rough. Yeah. it's never easy talking about these things on this show, or in this situation. But yeah, rest in peace to Kyle Busch. It was hard watching that, even though it was beautiful. The moment of silence and the memorial before the race. Just what to say. I feel so bad for his wife Samantha. I feel horrible for her. I feel absolutely horrible for her. Because she was such a big, she was one of the, honestly, she's probably the most recognizable NASCAR wife, I think, knowledge wise, and she was such a big part. And now with Brexton and his emergent talent as a racer, just to see all that go down. And again, for Brex to have his birthday to his dad dying 72 hours, it's awful, man. It's awful. So yeah, rest in peace to the great Kyle Busch. What a legacy on the sport. Like I said, the winningest driver in NASCAR history, across the 3 major series, and has helped launch a lot of the guys with KBM, and the opportunities and the roads and the paths that he paved, for a lot of the guys that are now in the Cup Series and are prominent stars. So shout out to KB, shout out to Rowdy, rest in peace. But horrible situation for the race. But the race must go on, all right? Because Kyle would have wanted it any other way. Let's be honest. All right, Rowdy would have wanted the people to race, and we did get a race. All right, we did get a race, and honestly, it was a pretty good race. But unfortunately, rain does come here in Charlotte for some reason every single Memorial Week, so it did get cut short. Suarez, who worked out, KBM guy, Kyle guy, does get the win. He does get to do the battle. We should have got the full race. I know a lot of guys, I know Denny wanted this one bad. Gibbs wanted it. And it would have been a really cool finish, but, somehow how it goes. That's just how it goes sometimes with the races and with the rain. So, yeah, Suarez wins the rain dance in a very emotional week in Charlotte. Now, ladies and gentlemen, with that said, let's go to entertainment. And you know what? I was going to say a lot happier, but I'm going to be honest. The boys finale was one of the finales of all time. I feel like we've been saying this throughout this entire season. It's been one of the seasons of a TV show of all time. Okay? That is the best thing I can say about it. Homelander died as expected, but nobody else died. Nobody else died. None of the major characters of the boy. It was Frenchie and that was it. Just Frenchie. Kimiko got the beam. She helped kill Homelander. Ryan, I think we all knew Ryan was going to survive. He, teams up. He helps kill Homelander. I guess he lost his powers, even though he's a natural born soup, so I don't know how it works, but I digress. Soldier Boy, of course, was not in the episode, as they said. That was very true. He was still iced up by his son, who is now dead, so I don't know what happens with Soldier Boy. Do they just keep him in the, I don't know, Vought is back in control, Stan Edgar, which was a cool way. Shout out to Giancarlo Esposito for Stan to kind of come back and, prove that he is resilient. He will always be there. And also, a great message about how corporations, even though you get these small victories, do oftentimes just go back to what they were doing. Butcher loses his powers, but he lives, and then just kind of F's off after, Huey gets him to not, spread the virus. Or actually, I guess, yeah, Butcher died. So I guess that was the other thing. But, kind of knew Butcher was going to die. The sickness, Butcher was not really surprised. But that was it. That was it. Technically, of the boys, it was Frenchie and Butcher. That's everybody that died. All right? And though Huey and Butcher, great moment. And honestly, Frenchie last week, great moment. You would have thought it'd been more bloody. I'm going to be honest. I feel like, honestly, the comic finish was better than the show finish. And certainly more iconic. Even though it was completely effed up, but it made more sense as the finale for a show like The Boys than the one we got, where it was just this big epic event, and they just crashed the Oval Office and destroyed that. I don't even think they really destroyed the White House, for the most part. Ashley went good, which was expected. The Deep had a very hilarious death versus Annie, who then got to ride off in the sunset with Huey and is pregnant. So yeah. I'm assuming the Huey, Annie team is what Jim V would have become, but of course that got canceled. Marie really didn't play too much of an important part, besides kind of the send-off at the end and having a moment with Annie, but nothing close to what it was hyped to be. So yeah, I think it was relatively an unsatisfying end to what was a very good show at one point, The Boys was. And really, like I said, it was an advertisement for Vault Rising, which it seems interesting, but it's like, I don't know where it's going. Like, I don't know what is being told here. I'll watch because I'm interested in the backstory. But again, I don't know exactly what, we're good. And I don't know if it was worth wasting the finale of this show in its last season for. But yeah, The Boys has come to a close. An iconic show of this generation, for better or worse. But yeah, the lows were low. The highs were high, but the lows were low. But at the end of the day, I do want to give a shout out to Anthony Starr for an absolutely iconic portrayal of a great character in Homelander. He was tremendous. I can't imagine anybody else having played that and flexing on his talent. I hope he doesn't get typecast following this. Though I expect to see him in a lot more stuff now that his stuff with Homelander is done. But yeah, that was The Boys. Euphoria, which I did not actually get to watch live, but we did get around to it. Also had its major overarching villain of the seasons, which was historically Nate Jacobs, played by Jacob Elordi. And honestly, very similar. Starr and Elordi were both great as their villainous characters. And we're off to bigger and better stuff. But the deaths were a little bit unsatisfying. Even though, like I said, I get where they were kind of going with Nate's character. And just kind of like a guy that peaked in high school that was a tormentor and abuser and all that stuff, and how now he's with the big fish and he's just, a fish out of water, so to speak. But I kind of got over the bit. I kind of got over the bit of Nate just kind of getting beat up. It just kind of felt like you're giving it. Like you're just kind of giving it. It didn't feel, in a way, it didn't feel earned, which is amazing. For if it had felt earned, I think it would have hit more and it would have made sense and I'd still been able to connect the dots. But him just getting jumped every week for the debt kind of took away from it. It wasn't like Nate was rebelling or anything. He was just trying and he just kept getting jumped or something cut off. Like it was just torture porn for a bunch of weeks and that was it. And then he dies with the rattlesnake. But he does have a lasting impact on Maddie and Cassie, as now Maddie is in debt to Alamo, and so is Cassie. Cassie is probably one of the girls. Rue finds out they're getting trafficked, as we all knew, and then she got ratted out by Lexi, and then Maddie, working with the DEA. So this one looks like it's going to be a very bloody conclusion here to probably the end of the series here for Euphoria. But we'll see. All right, honestly, after The Boys, I have no idea. So we will see what happens. Music this week, we have BNYX. Or I guess last week, should I say. The Genesis FM, I think it was the Deluxe. But it was solid. I'm not going to give it a rating, but I will highlight some songs. Telepathy, Love, Feet Clara the Song was incredible. All right, absolutely incredible. Shout out to Clara. I love her right now. Fanatic feat Bo Knox. I've never listened to Bo Knox, but this was a great song. Not as much trap. I know y'all came up off the BNYX and Yeet collabs, but very psychedelic, EDM-ish, almost very Kaytranada-ish, I dare say, type album from BNYX. So yeah, I thought it was solid. Those were my two highlights. Giveon dropped the deluxe as well for Beloved Act II. Think it was 7 songs, all features. Fool Me Once with Leon was the one for me, but it was nothing crazy. All right, overall, nothing too crazy on the deluxe. I don't know if it was really necessary. To be honest. But overall, still a great project. We loved the album last year. I give it a very high rating. Or maybe that was earlier this year. This year is flying by. But yeah, Fool Me Once with Leon. I mean, Leon's one of my favorite R&B artists. Probably my favorite R&B artist out currently. So that should really be no surprise. Him teaming up with Giveon here was my favorite track. But ladies and gentlemen, that was entertainment. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our main event, the NBA. Knicks versus Cavs is already over. Okay, it will be over shortly after this episode is released at 5 o'clock. They play tonight here on Memorial Day, and it will be done and dusted. I'm just going to call it for what it is. Okay, the Knicks win Game 3 here, though, 121-108, and it's been easy. As it has for the other 2 games of this series, it has been easy. The Cavs just look out of their depth. That's it. That is it. They have not posed an ounce of danger to this Knicks team. They are just washing them. Completely washing them. I'm disappointed. I am thoroughly disappointed. I thought the Cavs would at least make this an interesting series. This has been an absolute for 3 games. Belt for 3 games. Brunson has 30 in this game. Mikal had 22. OG had 21. They're just better. They're just better. Cleveland has no efficiency. Absolutely no type of efficiency from 3 right now. I mean, it's just brick after brick after brick after brick after brick after brick after brick. They were horrid in this game, despite having a relatively solid day shooting. If you look at the splits, multiple guys in double figures. Guys didn't really have bad games, but they just could not hit a 3 to save their life. And they rely heavily on that. Heavily on the 3. And it's just not going to work. All right, and it's not going to work against the Knicks. So, yeah, 3-0 lead for the Knicks. They ain't going to blow it. I think this goes to Game 4, and that is it. All right, I believe you should get the broomsticks ready for Cleveland because I think this is it, done and dusted. But we will see. We will see. And I want to say this, all right, for the Knicks, do not be surprised if they are somewhat dangerous here in the finals. Whether it's the Thunder or the Spurs, whoever they play, don't be surprised. I'm not saying the Knicks are winning the championship and we're going to get an all-time moment in New York City, but don't be surprised. I do not be surprised if they take a couple games off of whoever they're playing from the West, even though I would still favor whether it's the Spurs or the Thunder, which we don't really know because that series has been as good as advertised, even though Game 4 was not a great game. All right, the Spurs gave the belt to the Thunder. All right, they got their get back. All right, and it was much needed after OKC. It was a classic OKC dominant performance in Game 3. San Antonio put on the best defensive performance, all right, we have seen against the Thunder in 2 years statistically. All right, last time they were held under 90 points was an NBA Cup game in 2024 versus the Bucks. That was it. They have been over 90 every single game they've played since, except for this one. Except for this one. Spurs get it done here, 103-82. They gapped them early and just maintained that 20-point lead throughout. Even played well without Wemby. And Wemby just had an easy day, 31 minutes, which is huge. All right, absolutely huge. Because what has been the difference maker for the Thunder has been when that bench has come on. Jared, AJ, when he's come off the bench, Jalen Williams has played good. Like, that bench has been torching the Spurs. All right, that has been the one weakness we have seen from San Antonio, where that bench just was not as good as the Thunders. They would get the light shot out. Cornet is not a defensive anchor the same way that Wemby is, and they just were feasting. They were absolutely feasting. But yesterday, much better defensive performance, and OKC just could not hit shots on those San Antonio rims for whatever reason. McCain was like 2 for 10. It was bad. All right, it was bad. Caruso did cardio. It was a shutdown, lockdown performance. Wemby, of course, as the anchor of it. He had a very good offensive night as well. 33, 8, 5, 2 steals, 3 blocks. And again, in 31 minutes is exactly what you want. OKC shoots 33% from the field and 18% from 3. And that is just not going to get it done, ladies and gentlemen. However, they are dealing with injuries. All right, no AJ Mitchell in that game. Jalen Williams' injury. He re-aggravated the hamstring. He was out. So, interesting situation for Oklahoma City. All right. Absolutely. With as deep as this team is, not out of this by any means, but it was a very big game. All right. It was a very big game before. Not a must-win necessarily for OKC, but San Antonio needed to win this to even the odds and put some pressure back on the Thunder, right? Game 5, once again, can change everything. And it's going to mean somebody's going to have pressure either in Game 6 or Game 7, if we get to Game 7. But Game 4, Spurs had a win. I think a 3-1 would have been a lot for a team this young. I think that's when we'd start to see the cracks. But evening it up puts the pressure back on the Thunder to answer back and for the Spurs to keep it rolling. All right, got to keep it rolling. Having Fox back has been huge, even though he didn't have a particularly great game here. I feel like just having him as another ball handler, something to take the pressure off of Castle, who was dealing with turnovers earlier in the series. I think that's been huge, having him back relatively healthy. So, yeah, San Antonio gets a humming. Wemby back to looking like, Victor Wembanyama after a rough Game 3. And with that said, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the Roundup All right, men's lacrosse championship is today, of course, on Memorial Day, but the women's lacrosse championship was yesterday, and it had some big headlines. Of course, Chloe Humphrey. If this is the first mention of Chloe Humphrey, let me summarize this for you. She is, you know how we just talked about Wemby in the NBA segment? Yeah, this is Wemby. Okay, this is Wemby in women's lacrosse. She is the best player in the country and has been since last year when she was a freshman. She scored 100 goals this season. She's the points leader. She's probably going to win the women's lacrosse equivalent to the Heisman Trophy for a second straight year, making her 2 for 2 in her freshman and sophomore seasons. She is the best player possibly on the planet. And thus, North Carolina has been relatively dominant. Only one loss on their mark this season. They are the defending national champions. However, Northwestern has been a power in the sport and has some great talent of their own, and they battled it out. And ladies and gentlemen, it was a very, very good defensive performance, I want to say, from Northwestern, while also just playing a complete game. All right, they get it done here 14-11, upset Carolina, who a lot of people thought was going to be unstoppable with Humphrey engineering that offense the way she had been all season. They did a great job. Chloe didn't get off the way that she has. And credit where credit's due to the Wildcats. They win the Women's Lacrosse National Championship. Let's talk about football or soccer if you are American. And the World Cup is coming up soon, so probably more of y'all now. All right, more of y'all. Arsenal didn't bottle it, okay? Arsenal did not bottle it. I know a lot of y'all at home were rooting for it, for the memes, for the jokes, or just because you're an absolute hater. But unfortunately, the Gunners did not run out of ammo this season. They do close it out and win the Premier League. So congrats to Arsenal. Fair play to Arteta. Regardless of what y'all want to say about the play style, they got it done. All right, Arsenal got it done for the second time in my lifetime. They are Premier League champs. Spurs. we got teased this week, man. We got teased, right? It was like, oh, is Man City going to catch Arsenal? No. Is Spurs going to get relegated? No. All right, Spurs gets it done, gets the W that they had to have, and they do stay up, which means West Ham, even though they beat Leeds 3-0, it was the saddest win I've ever seen in my life, as they do get relegated. It's kind of a crazy fall off. It is a crazy, crazy fall. 3 years ago, they were winning the Europa Conference League Championship with Declan as captain in his last year, and it was happy days. Grealish had just left, so you still had the aspects of, our top guy Grealish, our top guy Dex, It was happy days in West Ham. And now it is gone. You're going to the championship just 3 seasons later. It's crazy. Crazy. But, we'll see what happens there for West Ham. Always an emotional moment for the players because everything changes. All right, everything changes. But Spurs, I guess the guys get to stay in the big boy stadium. All right, and not the little one for now. But, congrats there. Before I circle back to Arsenal, Bruno Fernandes did break, he did break the assist record for the Premier League, 21 assists. So shout out to Bruno. The UCL final, of course, is this week, okay? Arsenal, PSG. PSG is probably clearly the favorites. No surprise, defending champs. Look like the best team all season. However, Arsenal has got the momentum. All right, you've got the celebration of just winning the Prem. You got the parade literally the day after. So, hey, expectations are going to be high. They're going to be very, very high, Arsenal. All right, I don't want y'all to go around thinking, all right, it's time to take a break to the World Cup. No. That double would be so rich. So rich. So I want to see y'all game because I know PSG going to bring it. All right, I know PSG wants to go back-to-back. Dembele would be set up big time for another Ballon d'Or if he's able to get this done with how good that France team looks. But for now, that is UCL final. Other news in soccer. Moreno, it appears to be going to Real Madrid. I don't know if it's been officially finalized, but that appears for all intents and purposes to be happening. There's also a presidential election going on. We'll see if Flo can maintain control of Real Madrid or if he's about to get ousted or Bowl is gone. Ooh, what else? I think that's about it. World Cup selections, Neymar made it. Houston, no Real Madrid players made it for Spain. U.S., no Diego Luna, even though he's in literally every advertisement. Cole Palmer was in the Nike advertisement for England, but did not make the team, though they did have an all-timer of an announcement video. Though that was a very interesting team Tuchel selected, but we will see. All right, we'll see what happens there. Foden didn't make it, so we'll see. But yeah, everything's set up for the World Cup. But before we get to that, it's the biggest match of the year. And to close us out here, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know how to say this one. It was an absolute farce. This was an absolute farce. I love Alexander Usyk. He's one of the great boxers of all time. We know this. But I think Rico Verhoeven should be the heavyweight champion currently. He was beating the brakes off of Usyk for most of this fight. Now, Alexander started to cycle back. He got the knockdown right before this got stopped in the 11th round. But Rico was not he was in bad shape, but it wasn't like stoppage-worthy bad shape. This definitely felt like, okay, Usyk is not supposed to lose this fight, so this is a perfect opportunity for me to wave this off and get us out of here and Usyk, and we can go to what we were actually planning and not Rico disrupting everything. That's what it felt like. That is what it seemed like. Okay, this felt like yet another example of boxing at its highest level just being corrupt. Unfortunately, corrupt. And yeah, it's unfortunate. Usyk, like I said, one of the great boxers of all time, but this is a horrible look, okay? It was a horrible, horrible look. And then seeing the scorecards where they were already prepping to screw Rico, it was a horrible look. Because I do not know how you can watch that fight and have thought that Usyk was even up on the cards at the time. Much less, regardless of the stoppage, I don't know how you could fathomably believe that Usyk was up in that fight. It was like 8-3, 9-2. I'll maybe even see a 6-4, but it was no shot. No shot. Usyk was up, man. What were we doing? What are we doing? It's a horrible look for the sport. Rico got robbed. But yeah, Usyk remains heavyweight champion to set up, I guess, Dubois or whatever they're trying to do for the fight, whatever fight they're planning next. But it's bad looks, man. It's just bad looks. I'm not talking about the enhanced games. All right, I know. I've seen it. It's a scam. Nobody broke a record except for the swimming record, I guess. Nobody cares. I know y'all sent all these influencers down to Vegas, probably paid them nicely to go stream and film and pretending it was this super cool event. But no. All right, congrats to the guys for getting paid. All right, always here for athletes getting paid. So congrats to getting paid, but juicing up to try to break a world record, and it definitely was not going to happen because I'm going to be honest, all right? You can take as much juice as you want, and it will make you better, but you got to put the work in, all right? You got to put the work in. No records were ever really in danger. I'm going to be honest with you. You took these lower cusp, suspended already athletes, said, keep taking juice. Nobody was breaking a record. All right, Fred was not coming close. I don't care if he was now natty or whatever it was, or the 2 false start. He was never breaking Bolt's record. He was doing that for 250K. I'm not going into depth about that event. If you enjoyed it, fair play to you, but it was a farce. All right, it was a farce, just like the Rico Usyk fight. But, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for me. All right, that is it for me for episode 303. Happy Memorial Day once again, ladies and gentlemen. Without further ado, Ocho signing off.